You live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Oh, he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs. Hey, welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast, Thursday edition. We are back. Took Christmas off, which was probably a good thing because the Chiefs also took Christmas off. Patrick Allen here with you as usual, joined by the blog father, Arrowhead Addict co-founder Adam Best. Adam, did you have a nice Christmas? I feel like it was not a great Christmas for you.
Oh yeah, my dad was in town, and he is not the calm one out of the two of us. I mean, I can get upset, but when my dad's around, I don't have the liberty of getting upset because he's 10 seconds away from drinking bleach. That was the kind of mode he was in on Sunday or Monday, I guess. Yeah,
it was Monday. Rough day all around. We hope that all of you out there are having a nice holiday season. If you celebrate Christmas, we hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, all that stuff, and that you're excited about the new year. I know it's difficult when your favorite football team, who you have Super Bowl aspirations for, goes out and plays a game like that against a hated, bitter rival in the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk through our feelings on it. We're going to preview this Bengals game, but we're here for you, and we're going to be here for you on New Year's Eve because this is a big game for the Chiefs. It's unbelievable, Adam, as we sit here, but the Chiefs actually could miss the playoffs. Like it's not even that wacky of a scenario for them to miss the playoffs. If they lose out and like the Broncos and Raiders win, they could be done. It's just I can't believe we're talking about that instead of talking about the number one seed. Things have really changed quickly. So we're going to get into all of it. If you're watching out there on YouTube, hit the like button. Let's get a bunch of Chiefs fans in here. Let's have some group therapy, whatever we need to do. And of course, shout out to all of our members. We appreciate your support as always, even during this time of year where I know everybody's busy and trying to blow off some steam. So let's get into it, Adam. A few news items to hit. The first of which is L'Jarius Sneed is a little bit banged up. Now, Spags said he's hopeful that he's going to be able to go out there and play. He was injured, and then he came back in the game against the Raiders. Not that it ended up making any difference, but he was held out of practice yesterday. I don't know if the injury report's out yet today. How worried would you be if L'Jarius Sneed's not available in this one?
Very worried. We're playing against Jamar Chase. He's already talking trash, trying to get himself fired up. We also have to contend with T. Higgins, no slouch in his own right, as well as Tyler Boyd. So it doesn't really matter who's throwing those guys the ball. I mean, obviously it does to some extent, but they're going to ball out no matter who they're going up against, unless it's L'Jarius Sneed, who holds wide receiver ones to 49.6 yards a game. That is best in the league. So that would definitely change if he's not around.
Yeah, and actually the injury report is out. So he did not practice today. Again, look, he's got a calf injury. This could be precautionary. He's a veteran guy. He knows what to do if he's a little bit banged, especially, being hurt and then going back in the game and playing through it. The Chiefs, knowing the importance of this game and how tricky calf injuries can be, maybe are just trying to be extra cautious with him. So keep an eye on the injury report tomorrow. If he's limited, that's a good sign. It means he's probably going to play and they're just basically resting him up. If he doesn't practice tomorrow, that's bad news. Jalen Watson did not practice on Wednesday with an illness. He was a full participant today. Isaiah Pacheco, concussion and a shoulder injury, did not practice on Thursday. Not a great sign. It doesn't mean it's impossible that he's not going to play, but usually you like to see a guy coming off the concussion be limited in these early practices, and then it tends to work out. Not always, but it tends to work out that they can play. But the longer that they're a DNP, it just might not be. He's got to go through several steps of the concussion protocol. And the fact that he's not even limited in practice would maybe indicate that he's not there yet, which means it might be the CEH show again.
And Jalen says here, rest Pacheco until the playoffs. We don't have that luxury. We're fighting for our playoff lives right now. I will say, when Pacheco does come back, get that man a chin strap that works, because his helmet was flying off. He got kneed in the head. It was ugly.
Yeah, they were talking about, like, he's got a lot of hair. That's kind of a problem, but they got to figure, the training staff, they got to figure out a way to keep that helmet on. His helmet's flown off a few times this year, and obviously not great. That's what the helmet's for. Taking a knee to the head like that is that's tough. As far as everybody else on the report goes, Donovan Smith still did not practice. We'll probably be seeing Wanye Morris again. Kadarius Toney he did not practice on Wednesday, and there's just nothing there right now on the injury report for him. It's just a blank space. So I don't know what that means. Trey Smith was limited. Everybody else on the report was a full participant. McCole Hardman has been a full participant for 2 days. Do you think he can give the Chiefs anything if he can get back on the field?
My first instinct was to say no, but the bar is so incredibly low right now that possibly, yeah. I mean, just giving them some element of dynamism. I don't know if that's end arounds or whatever, but anybody with a tad of juice right now can help.
Yeah. And Phantom asks, if the Chiefs win against the Bengals, we win the division and are locked in at the 3 seed. After all the injuries, we should treat week 18 as a bye and rest the starters. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to risk anybody getting hurt in a meaningless game if you're locked in. I'm with you. The only thing that would make me want them to play is they've got to figure some shit out, man. Like, yeah. If they go out and have another bad performance against the Bengals, but eke out a win, yes, you're not going to be feeling really good going to the playoffs. But I mean, how would you handle that if you were Andy Reid?
I don't think they have that luxury. They're first in offensive penalties in the entire NFL. These guys are having trouble with motioning, shifting. Their 2 most reliable receivers last game, Richie James and Rashee Rice, don't seem to know the playbook. Wanye Morris, who gave up 10 pressures and is hanging on for dear life. I love his potential, but he's not there yet. He needs every rep he can get. I just don't think they have the luxury with an offense that is barely functional of taking a week off and expecting to hit the ground running in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough, especially if you're not feeling great about your chances. I don't know. I'm with you. They got to figure it out. They need to string together a good game, because this stretch has been so ugly, the ugliest of the Mahomes era, that it's kind of go out there and try to figure it out and try to get some momentum built up. And look, maybe you can do that in a half, and you go out there and you put together a good half offensively. Everyone's feeling good. Get them the hell out of there. But this is tough. Lucas says the Chiefs are only locked into the 3 seed if they beat Cincy and Buffalo or Miami wins on Sunday. So that's possible. Jeremy says you're not going to figure it out in 1 week. Rest and heal up. Take your chances. I understand that perspective.
Things can get worse in 1 week. I'm not saying they'll figure it out, but I think things could get sloppier if they have a week off from reps. Yeah,
absolutely. Another non Chiefs thing. Russell Wilson got benched. They benched him. And they're going to cut him. That insane contract that they gave him, they're going to be in cap hell. They'll get some relief by getting him off the books, but I mean, he's going to count for a ton of money. This is obviously a Sean Payton thing, right? I know that he's not been good this year, but he's been better than he was last year. And they're kind of in the hunt. Are you surprised by this, that they're just cutting bait with him completely?
I'm not. Sean Payton is probably determined, as he should have determined, that he's not the long-term answer for the Broncos. They're looking to build something sustainable and serious. So I think they're probably thinking, why not just get a jump start on that?
Yeah. And look, I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, if you're looking for a silver lining in all this mess right now, the Chiefs still have a really talented roster, young players. They've obviously got some major holes that they need to fill, but they're fillable. The Chargers don't have a coach right now, and they're in a bad cap situation too, and they've got a bunch of aging veterans on the offensive side of the ball. They might need to go through like a little bit of a mini rebuild. The Raiders are actually on the upswing. They look like the second best team in the division right now with an interim coach. That does tend to happen, but we've seen it before, right? In Kansas City, old Romeo Crennel got a listless Chiefs team rocking and rolling again, and it wasn't actually the right decision to bring him back. So we'll see what the Raiders do. And then the Broncos are going to be starting over completely, and they're pinning their playoff hopes on Jared Stidham. So all things considered, it could be worse if you're a Chiefs fan, even if this season doesn't end the way that we want it to.
Yeah, Russell Wilson is the one quarterback who has thrown more passes behind the line of scrimmage than Mahomes. So as much as our offense has been in disarray, theirs has been worse somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk Jamar Chase. Now, you mentioned he's already talking trash. Now, I've got Jamar Chase on one of my fantasy teams, and I really wish I had Justin Jefferson because I think Justin Jefferson's better, and I also find him infinitely more likable than Jamar Chase, who, like, every time he opens his mouth, I'm like, oh, man, maybe I should trade him for my fantasy team. But he's incredibly talented. He's out there talking trash about the Chiefs secondary, saying that they're nothing special and that there's no Jalen Ramsey out there, just completely ignoring what Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed have done this year. And look, I don't expect him to go out there and heap praise on the Chiefs. That's just the kind of guy he is, and it's a bitter rivalry. But also, he was projected to maybe not make this game, but he was limited in practice today. And with him talking like that, do you think he plays in this one?
I think he plays. He's a competitor, and this is just par for the course for him. He likes to talk. He likes to chirp. I think it helps him get in a groove, get in the right mindset. With a lot of guys, you'd say, let's not go there. But with him, I just think it's part of who he is. So, and the guy's a top 5 receiver. I mean, Tyreek's the same way. Tyreek likes to talk, and it seems to get him going sometimes. Has it occasionally bit him in the ass? Yeah. Same thing with Jamar. I think if L'Jarius Sneed plays, it could totally bite him in the ass. And I'm hoping that he does. Of course.
Yeah, I hope Sneed plays and goes out there and locks him down. But
you're conflicted though, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, for the Chiefs' sake, it would be better. I think the Chiefs would have a much easier time if Sneed was following T. Higgins around and McDuffie could go, wherever he needs. I think that's obviously better for the Chiefs in the long run. But look, if the Chiefs are going anywhere this year, they need to be able to beat this Bengals team without Joe Burrow. Period. Full stop. End of discussion. So they're not gonna luck out on the injury front all the way to a Super Bowl championship. It's just not gonna happen. So yeah, man, it's Jeremy doesn't think Sneed's playing. It's gonna be tough. I'm worried about this game. We're gonna get to it in a minute and we're gonna break it down. But I think if you're a Chiefs fan after that game against the Raiders, they could lose to anybody in any fashion. So we all should be concerned.
I'd worry about us playing in the college football playoffs at this point.
Yeah, right.
Last week was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I said, no way they're going to lose to the Raiders. This is a get right game. I'm done with that. I'm not taking any game for granted. They can lose to anybody right now.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's get to some burning questions as the season winds down here. And I wanted to ask this one to you. And I think it's an interesting one. And I haven't heard a lot of people really talk about this too much during this bad stretch of football that they've been playing. And the question is, do you think the Chiefs are a victim of their own success? And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, I'm a soccer fan. I follow Liverpool over in the EPL, and their rivals over there, Manchester City, and Manchester City is like the Patriots dynasty right now. The EPL, like they've won a bunch of championships. Liverpool snuck one in there during COVID, but these guys win it almost every year. And I always marvel at how they're able to keep doing it. They play so, like, if you follow soccer, they play so many games and they're in all these different tournaments and stuff. And I'm like, how do they keep playing at this level over and over and over again? And I did feel like there's been a couple of times where they've waned a little bit and they'll lose a few games. It's uncharacteristic. They usually can get back in it. The year Liverpool won, they weren't able to. And Liverpool basically had to win every game of the year. Like, that's how good these guys are. And I feel like we've been seeing that with the Chiefs. And I wonder, is this year a year where they won a Super Bowl, they got back to a Super Bowl and they lost, so that was really driving them. And then they finished the job and they got back and they won another Super Bowl. And is what we're seeing this year partially just a team that's like trying to figure out how to keep competing at that level? I mean, isn't it natural to like let your guard down a little bit and get a little sloppy when you've had so much success? And it just always works out for you for the most part. And that they've got to kind of go through a little bit of hell to get that drive back. And maybe it even costs them an entire season.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify. Do they still have the eye of the tiger? That's hard to know. There's a lot of different personalities on the team that are at a lot of different stages of their career. What I will say is that because they have Patrick Mahomes, I do think they are victims of their own success. And that extends not only to his teammates, but to Brett Veach, Clark Hunt, and Andy Reid, who I think saw Patrick Mahomes win a Super Bowl in a suboptimal situation last year. He just went God mode with a group of receivers that wasn't good enough, with 2 tackles who weren't good enough. And still, he played some of the best football in the league. His pressure to sack rate was the lowest in the league, despite his tackles giving up more pressures than any other tackle combo in the league. And I just kind of thought that they said he's a talent elevator. He can get by with new tackles. He can get by with subpar receivers, and they just put too much on his shoulders. He can win like this, but he cannot win every season like this because he's not perfect. He's not a perfect human being. Nobody is, even Patrick. And I think they just expected a little too much of him this season without that much continuity. You throw in, I know Andy Reid calls the plays, but Eric Bieniemy was a big part of that culture and that offense. And I don't necessarily think they need him to be a disciplinarian, but his attention to detail has been sorely missed. So I think there is a little hubris. They are a little maybe too big for their britches. I do think because they have Patrick Mahomes, there's this feeling. I had this feeling until Monday that Pat's going to figure it out. He'll go hell or high water mode, and he'll drag this team kicking and screaming as far as he possibly can. I don't know, man. They put him in a really bad situation.
Yeah, it's hard. And I feel like one thing he doesn't have this year is I feel like these receivers don't run for him. Like in past years, when things would break down or wouldn't work out, he would either scramble or make it happen, or one of those guys would come open. And it just seems like this year, I don't know if it's the personnel, Rice being a rookie and Kelsey just being tired, or I don't know what it is, but like it doesn't seem like anyone's going and making plays. And guys all the way back, even the not like super talented guys like DeMarcus Robinson would do that. They would hustle. They would find a way to get open. When I watch these guys out there, it just feels like they're not having fun anymore. It's like everything is a chore. And I think that they're becoming a little bit of a head case now. Like they're starting to fear that first mistake. And it's like a complete lack of confidence across the board. It's like, oh, here we go. Well, this drive's done. And it reminds me of the Chiefs with like Alex Smith and even Matt Castle, where it was like, if something went wrong, you know what I mean? Like it was like, okay, well, like, oh, we got a false start penalty, or we got a 10-yard holding penalty. Just punt now, because they're just going to like run a draw and they've got no chance. And it's not like the Chiefs are not aggressive in those situations with Mahomes this year, but it just feels like it's a foregone conclusion now that this isn't working. and it's not going to be consistent. And that's what happens. There's so many times, if you look at some of the tape, guys are open, he doesn't throw it to them, or nobody's open. You know what I mean? Like it's not all one thing. There's drops, there's penalties, there's Mahomes making bad decisions, there's Mahomes not trusting what he's seeing. Like it's just all messed up. It's like they didn't have training camp. It's like they just all showed up and started trying to play together, and they've never had any practice, and everything is off. It's really incredible. And there's, people want to point to one thing or another, and I just think it's everything. It's the whole team.
I think it is the entire team. And I'll go ahead and segue to our next question. Was the Raiders game finally rock bottom? I think it was, for this reason. Mahomes had played well, really exceptionally, if you consider the league leading in drops. This is the most drops a wide receiver group has had in a decade. So he's been asked to overcome all those things that we talked about, 2 new tackles, yada, yada, yada. But this is the first game where he had made up his mind pre-snap that I'm just going to play hero ball. I'm not throwing to MVS. And who can blame him? Who can blame him for not throwing to MVS? But right now, he's not even looking at him. So either he has to start throwing to him, or the coaches have to take him off the field, because you can't have your wide receiver who leads the team in snaps just purely a decoy that the defense knows is a decoy. They're in such a bad place with Mahomes not trusting his tackles, not trusting his receivers, and just going into scramble mode, that it's making the job of the defense very easy.
Yeah, it is. I think it was absolute rock bottom. I thought they'd hit it against the Packers because it was just such a terrible performance from them. But I did not see them being able to play that badly against the Raiders. I also think, and maybe people would disagree with me on this, is for all the struggles that they have, I do think that game against the Raiders was an aberration. I think their struggles that they're having made it worse. But I think even if they were playing well, I think they would have had a bad game against the Raiders. I don't know if it was at Christmas. You know what I mean? It's the holidays. Like these guys are human beings.
There was bad wind too. We haven't really talked about that much, but
it was you have games like that throughout the course of the season, and it gets amplified when you're not playing well, right? So I don't think it's as bad as it looked. Like I don't think they're going to play that way again against the Bengals. If they do, man, they might as well just pack it in.
The frustrating thing is I went back and rewatched the game, and they had that trick play touchdown to Pacheco, and it looked like they were having fun again. They were on their Harlem Globetrotters shit, razzle dazzle. I think sometimes that gets the Chiefs energized. The next series, they go back to it. I think maybe they go back to the trick play inside their own red zone just because that kind of thing gets them going. But they give up a defensive touchdown. Then on the very next play, they give up another defensive touchdown. And just as they were starting to get the life injected back into them, I think it got sucked out of them. They just looked like they were, they look like they don't want to be out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I think there was some holiday blues going on. I really do. Again, if they were playing well, they could have had the holiday blues and still won that game. So it still goes back to the issues that they're having. But that was just, that's the first Chiefs game I can remember in a long time where I was sitting there midway through the third quarter, and I was like, when's this going to be over? Like, I actually wanted the game to be over. Like, we had to go up to the north side of Chicago to have Christmas dinner with our family. And I was just like, man, like, why am I sitting here? We're not even doing a podcast. I could be up playing with my niece and nephew and, drinking a Christmas ale. And instead I'm watching this crap. I mean, that's a new feeling in the Mahomes era because he is such a blast. I feel lucky every time I get to sit down and watch this team. And that by the time that game was in mid third quarter, I was just like, man, the hell with this. This sucks. Like, this is bringing me down. Listen, I mentioned earlier, this team could miss the playoffs. And like, I think as we're all sitting here right now, we're like, they're not going to miss the playoffs. But like, this Bengals team is better, even with Jake Browning, is better than that Raiders team that just whooped them, and is better than the Chargers team they're going to face in Week 18. So if they play poorly, this team will beat them. Like they're well coached. They have a solid defense who knows them. And, you mentioned Jamar Chase playing in this game. I mean, you don't think that dude and the Bengals, like they kind of know in the back of their minds they're not going anywhere, but they could still make the playoffs. So if Jamar Chase is banged out, if they were out of it, yeah, he might sit this game out. But like, they've got a lot to play for. Revenge for last year. They hate the Chiefs. Messing up the Chiefs season would be great for them, and they could still get in the playoffs. How worried are you that the Chiefs could lose this game? And then we're sitting here looking at this Week 18 game like, are they going to miss the playoffs?
I'm extremely worried. Mahomes had an average depth of target of 4 yards last week, and I think he only had 4 completions that were past the line of scrimmage in the entire game. You go into a game against a Lou Anarumo defense with that kind of style, he will eat you alive. And we saw against the Raiders, they were stacking the box. They were tight in coverage. They were jumping routes. Justin Watson even said, yeah, they were jumping every route. They can't play like that. They're going to have to shake things up. They're going to have to play in rhythm a little bit more. They're going to have to refine some verticality. It can't just all be let Mahomes go, be a wizard out of structure and bail us out. He can't do that with his surrounding talent. They have to be a little bit more disciplined. And yeah, speaking of discipline, no more self-inflicted wounds. The amount of penalties is staggering. The amount of turnovers, they have the worst turnover differential in the league. And that's not just an offensive problem. That's a defense that, while great against the pass, doesn't force turnovers. They don't. And they don't stop the run very well. So it's just a team that isn't set up very well.
Yeah, and I love you, Lauren Shanks. He said it's an overreaction to be this low on the Chiefs. And Jeremy says, are we watching the same season? Right now, coming out of that game, I think one thing we need to all remember is just because something has been gone a certain way does not mean it's going to continue to go that way. The Chiefs also had a long winning streak earlier this season. They still had some of the same problems, but when you're not playing well and you don't have as much margin for error, you can have both of those things happen. And over the years, I mean, even down the stretch last year, there were so many games they played like dog shit and they should have lost, and they pulled it out, and they always managed to pull it out. You flip a coin enough times, you're going to get heads 10 times in a row. And right now the Chiefs have some issues, and they're not getting the friendly bounces. They're not getting some of the lucky things that have happened, and they're not doing themselves any favors. And because of that, they're having a rough patch. I believe that this team can still turn it around. I honestly do. And the reason I think that is because I've seen them do it this year. I've seen them win a bunch of games in a row. I've seen them play well. And I'm looking at the roster. Like, it's not like this is, one of the Arizona Cardinals talent-wise. It's not. Like, these guys, MVS played well for the Chiefs last year. Like, these guys can have a good game easily. And remember, like, when you think back over the course of the season, they beat the Miami Dolphins, took care of them. They didn't play great, but they beat them over in Germany. They went to the wire with the Eagles. They would have beaten the Bills, probably had a really good chance to beat the Bills. Like, this was not that long ago. Like, even with all of the frustrating things that have happened with this team, they have been right there in every single game that they've played. The only game that I felt like they just got beat was against the Packers. The Packers,
but even that, they call that pass interference call. And granted, there's missed calls for both teams throughout the entire game, but I don't think there's been a game that doesn't come down to a loss that doesn't come down to one play all season long.
Yeah, right. And so it's possible. My question is, are they so mentally gone right now that it just doesn't, that they're going in the wrong direction, right? Like it's not, they can't go back to where they were at the beginning of the season because they had a different confidence level at the beginning of the season based on what they had done previously. And now they're looking at themselves and they're like, oh man, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy every time they go out there that there's just going to be a shit show at some point, and maybe they can eke out a win. But they've been bad, man. They've been bad. Go for KC Chiefs ever says the offense looked totally pathetic, and people saying a team that has a weakness that the Chiefs hasn't took advantage of most of the year. Yeah, man, like it's just, and there's one thing I also that I think is happening here, which is that teams have adjusted. It's a constant dance in the NFL. So you had the Tyreek thing and 50 touchdown Mahomes and the big plays and shock and awe. And then like they figured it out and the Chiefs struggled and still adjusted, made the AFC Championship game and lost, and then traded Tyreek, unveiled a whole new style of play and won the Super Bowl. Mahomes won an MVP. And like teams spent all offseason looking at what they were doing last year. And it doesn't seem like the Chiefs have the personnel to adjust again to the way that teams are playing them. And they haven't quite figured it out. And Andy's trying. That's why he's throwing all these vertical passes. He's trying to get run after the catch. He's trying to take advantage of the way teams are playing them. And it's just not working. It's, for the most part, it's not working unless it goes to Rashee Rice.
Yeah. And I feel like defenses in the NFL, they crowdsource stopping these great offenses. It's not like they just conceive the brilliant blueprint in one fell swoop. They see something that one team does, and then another team does something, and slowly they Frankenstein together a defensive game plan that just completely stifles what the Chiefs are doing. And you're seeing some of this with Andy Reid disciple Doug Peterson down in Jacksonville, whose run game is predictable, whose offense is a little too horizontal for my liking and too predictable. I mean, I think there might be a problem with this West Coast style for the defensive trends in the league that just seem to be a bad fit for what the Chiefs are trying to do.
Yeah, our pal, our resident Bills fan, who's a great friend of this podcast, by the way, Action Jackson says, "Watch out for the Chargers. They've got that big GIF energy right now. My Bills almost found out the hard way on Saturday night." Yeah, I mean, look, Easton Stick's going out there. This is a huge opportunity for him. Like, you know, these teams aren't laying down. They've got talent. So the Chiefs, the cakewalk game was against the Patriots, and they even struggled in that one. So they better buckle their chin straps, especially Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, I remember, last game of the season a while back, and the Chiefs beat the Chargers and knocked them out of the playoffs. And I think the Chargers would love to do that to the Chiefs, would love to disrupt their season or at least send them into the playoffs on bad footing, play the spoiler. Both these teams, there's no love lost between them and the Chiefs. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk.
Yeah. All these teams down the stretch here all hate the Chiefs, want to beat them. So,
I mean, look at where we're at. Jake Browning and Easton Stick, we would be on a scale of 1 to 10 on the confidence scale. We would be 11 any of the previous 5 years. But right now I feel like a 2.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think, and we're going to get to the game here now. And just one, I think we got a minute for it. How much of this do you blame on Matt Nagy? I just tweeted about this. I've brought it up on the podcast a bunch of times. When Eric Bieniemy was with the Chiefs, it was, he doesn't do anything. That's why he's not getting head coaching jobs. He's just not that good of a coach. People were writing articles about how he was fighting with Mahomes and he was causing issues and breaking up the harmony. And then the dude leaves and goes to Washington, and they bring in Matt Nagy, and the Chiefs struggle. And now all of a sudden the Chiefs offensive coordinator role is responsible for everything. And Matt Nagy's too soft. They needed Eric Bieniemy back. It's this. I'm telling you, man. It's the same people saying this shit. So which is it? Was is the offensive coordinator role important or is it not? Because if it is, then you can't not give Eric Bieniemy credit for the success.
You have to. I think it's important. I don't think it's so important that the people who blame Matt Nagy or blamed Eric Bieniemy, it's not that important. Andy Reid, he is the architect of this offense. He calls the plays. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him. But I will say Matt Nagy's attention to detail seems lacking right now. Andy Reid is kind of the figurehead for the entire coaching staff. He can't do everything from an attention to detail standpoint. And when you have the most penalties in the league offensively, and you just look discombobulated, some of that has to go on the offensive coordinator. What them bringing back Matt Nagy as offensive coordinator signals to me, and part of the problem here is, in politics, there's this famous term, team of rivals. Abe Lincoln coined it. He didn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of yes men. I think Andy Reid is surrounded by a bunch of yes men. I think they have like what's the word I'm looking for? Homogenous. I don't know. They have it's like an inbred coaching staff. They're not bringing anybody from other trees into the room to throw some new ideas around. Let's get someone from that Shanahan McVay tree to add a little bit of a new wrinkle to the offense, a little dissent in the coaches meeting. I just think they're not shaking it up. I don't know if they're capable of shaking it up because they all think the same way. They're all very stuck in their ways. And it's hard to say what Matt Nagy's role is in this, but I do think him being offensive coordinator is sort of indicative of Andy Reid being in his comfort zone. And Bill Walsh used to have this thing called the 10-year rule, where if a coach has been somewhere or a coaching staff for 10 years, you're in danger of losing the team, of being tuned out, of things getting stale. So I definitely think they need to shake things up this offseason. I'm not saying, anybody needs to get fired, but I definitely think they need some outside voices in that staff.
Good comment here from Oregon Fishing. No one knows what's really going on behind closed doors at one Arrowhead Drive. They can't replace any coaches or players now. They have to roll with what they have. And this is sort of the crux of my point. I think some people, when I say this stuff, they think I'm defending Matt Nagy, because I'm saying like, hey, look, he doesn't call the plays. Like, you're mad about the play calling, but he's not calling the plays. He's not making Juwan Taylor get false starts. Like, he just seems like a convenient fall guy to me. They're all responsible. Nagy, Connor Embry, Andy Reid, but I think fans are so, it was when everybody was trashing Connor Embry because he gave a bad press conference. Like, he wasn't great on the mic. He's not Stone Cold Steve Austin of press conferences. Like, it just felt like I felt bad for the guy, because my point is, like, you have no fucking idea what you're talking about when you're like, that guy sucks. He's the problem. Like, he was on the coaching staff last year. He was not the wide receiver coach, but he was working with the wide receivers. So you didn't even know who he was last year. I guarantee it. You didn't even know who he was.
But that's part of the problem, right? I don't think we should jump to conclusions because of a bad press conference.
Right.
Nick Sirianni famously had a horrific press conference when he was introduced as Eagles head coach. In his second season, he went to the Super Bowl, right? So, these guys aren't politicians.
Right.
To some extent, what they say to the press doesn't matter that much if they can connect with their team. What I will say about Connor Embry is, if you look at the other premium positions, offensive line, you have Andy Heck coaching that unit. Secondary, corners in particular, you have Dave Merritt coaching that unit. Defensive line, you have Joe Cullen. So all the other premium positions have very experienced, well thought of coaches. And with wide receivers, they throw out this young buck without a lot of experience or clout. And it gives me pause. It makes me worry that this team, and you look back through Andy Reid's track record, and there's signs that they don't value the wide receiver position enough. That's where I get worried with Connor Embry and some of the other breadcrumbs when it comes to maybe they don't value this position as much as the rest of the league, and they probably should.
Yeah, it's tough too. I mean, Andy's turned out some really tremendous coaches. So like none of us know, like Embry could be an amazing coach.
Could be the next Mike Kafka.
Right.
We don't know.
We don't. And at the end of the day, we don't know. We just don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know exactly what the problem is. But somebody just a second ago, I threw their chat up there, said the buck stops with Reid. And that is 100%. It's Andy. It's on Andy. If the coaching staff doesn't work, it's Andy's fault. If the players are doing the wrong things, that's Andy's fault. He's the boss. He's the one in charge. He's got to figure out a way to get them refocused, and he's not been able to do that so far this year. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's preview this Chiefs Bengals game. Appreciate all your support. Everybody in the comments, you guys are great. Really insightful stuff. Keep it coming. Jalen Butler says hire Terrell Owens for the wide receiver coach. Interesting idea. Keep them coming. Hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube. It helps get our product out to more people. So Chiefs Bengals. It's despite how putrid the Chiefs were last week, Vegas is not convinced that they're bums, and they are a 7-point favorite with an over/under of 44 in this game. What do you think of that line? Do you think it should be closer?
Yeah, I think it should be closer. I mean, they lost the Raiders at home on Christmas Day last week. So, and maybe some of that could be chalked up to a divisional opponent, but there's been a lot of losing lately. And I just don't have confidence in this team anymore. I even thought about picking against them, against a backup quarterback. I didn't, and we'll get to that. Yeah, I think that line should be more like 4-6, but a touchdown. Yeah. Their offense isn't scoring. What gives Vegas so much confidence?
I feel like it should be a 4-point. But I think Vegas is looking at the Chiefs defense and the inexperience of Browning and just saying, like, we just think it's more likely that the Chiefs aren't going to have an offensive disaster, like turnover fest again, and play that poorly, and that their defense will continue to play well, and that they'll end up, forcing some mistakes and running away with this one. I hope they're right, man, because this is not a team to take lightly. So the Bengals have won 3 in a row. Jake Browning, when he stepped in for Joe Burrow, he started a game against the Steelers, and they lost because they're the Steelers, and they had, like, doesn't matter how bad they are, or they could throw me or you in there at quarterback, and like Mike Tomlin would still somehow find a way to make, drag everybody down into the mud, make the game ugly, and win some games they shouldn't win. And then once Browning settled in, man, I mean, he had an absolutely unbelievable game against the Jaguars. They beat the Colts. They beat the Vikings. Look, none of these teams are like world beaters.
Yeah, but they're all fighting for their playoff lives. Yeah. They're not teams that are just out of it and have nothing to play for.
Right. Yeah. These are all quality teams, good NFL teams. And I mean, you got to give the Colts credit. I mean, they got Gardner Minshew back there, and they're giving Houston everything they can take for that division. And Browning has played really well. He's not afraid to you see some of these guys come in and they're just complete disasters. They're absolutely petrified. They can't keep up with the pace of the game, and they can't throw the ball down the field. Browning is not that dude. He looks a little bit like Joe Burrow at times back there. Like, he's pretty cool in the pocket. He'll stand in there. He'll chuck the ball downfield. He's getting the ball to these playmakers like T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. And when you do that, good things usually happen. What is your how do you think Jake Browning's going to play in this game against this Chiefs defense, this is by far, since the Steelers game, this is by far the best defense he's faced.
in a sick way, I guess I find this amusing because from a team building standpoint, it shows what a replacement level quarterback can do with the league's best receiving core and what the best the best quarterback in the league can do with a replacement level receiving core. So you're throwing to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. How hard can it possibly be? It's a little foolproof. Not to take anything away from the kid. He's game. He's poised. But from like a talent perspective, the other thing is we saw this with Tommy Cutlets. We saw this with the Pastronaut. Anybody can come in and be a flamethrower for 3 or 4 weeks. But when there's tape on you and your weaknesses start getting exposed, that facade can get ripped away real fast. Yeah. And I am kind of excited to see what Spags will send at this kid because I'm expecting it to be pretty intense.
I think so too, man. I think I mentioned this earlier in the season when Joe Burrow was still active, but I thought, hey, this is the best Chiefs defense that has had to have, they were the best equipped Chiefs defense to go up against the Bengals because of, another year of McDuffie, the way that Snead had been playing, the way the pass rush has come through, the linebacker play, like everything.
Watson was great last week, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't scared of the Bengals in the way that I was in the past, where it was like, we're just going to keep getting mossed over and over again by these guys, and we're not going to get home, and it's just going to be really, really frustrating. So if they can get pressure on Browning, I think that's it. He started to fray around the edges a little bit. He had a few turnovers last week, and then he sort of managed to pull it together. The week before, he had a bad first half and then played really well. But I think you're right. When these backup quarterbacks come in, especially if they've got talent around them. I mean, we saw Josh Dobbs play well this year and go to Minnesota, and then he got benched. Tommy Cutlets, right? These guys can do it. But the reason that they're backup guys is that you really only want them to come in for a couple games because they're just not good enough to win consistently. And we don't really know if Jake Browning is one of those guys or not yet, because he hasn't really turned into a pumpkin yet. This could be the game if the Chiefs defense can get after him and create pressure and really frustrate the Bengals. I think that this could be the game, particularly if they can prevent Joe Mixon from getting going. He's not been like overwhelmingly good this year, but he's been productive for them, kind of in the plodding 4 yards a carry way that he has been for the last few years. And I feel like when they have him going, that's when they're the most dangerous, because he's an afterthought when Chase and Higgins are out there.
Yeah, he's not the most efficient running back, but he's tough and durable and above the replacement level. I mean, I'm not the biggest Joe Mixon guy, but when they have complementary football going to sort of pile on top of that passing attack, they're a pretty hard offense to stop. So I don't know, man. I'm worried with facing Jake Browning. I never imagined that we would be here 1 year after winning the Super Bowl, but here we are. Look at us.
Shout out to Bumpa, our pal, for the super chat. It says Chiefs lost 4 straight and Arrowhead, the aura is done. Yeah, they haven't won a game at Arrowhead since Thanksgiving. Like
the cloak of invincibility has been just ripped off and torn to shreds, right? Superman bleeds is kind of what's going on around the league, right?
It absolutely is. And people smell blood in the water and they feel like this is their chance. That's why it will be really satisfying if they can somehow like get up off the mat, like wipe the blood out of their eyes and do it again. I mean, it would be so satisfying after what they've put us through for these last month.
Like the Rocky 3 plot line, right?
Right.
Is that what you're thinking?
That's basically it. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, the way to attack the Bengals in this game is to run the football. And honestly, I think the Bengals do not have a good run defense. I think that was the big mistake against the Raiders, They were getting a lot of pressure up front, and the offensive line wasn't playing well. And Andy was just like, screw it. He just stopped trying to run. And I think that was a huge mistake. Even when it doesn't work, it helps keep the defense a little bit honest. I think that was a problem. And I think if they don't do that in this game, Lou Anarumo is going to eat them alive, because he's done a good job against this offense every time that they've played him. Do you think the Chiefs will get? I mean, it doesn't look like Isaiah Pacheco is going to play as we sit here right now. Hopefully that changes. CEH though he's running like he's got something to prove. Do you think they'll be able to get the running game going in this one?
Just a rough beat. I mean, Jerick McKinnon was so clutch for this team down the stretch last year and into the playoffs, and it looked like he was going to be Mr. December again. He's out of the equation. Isaiah Pacheco probably won't be likely either. I guess we'll see. It's a lot to ask of CEH, especially with the Chiefs lacking that vertical element. I think that they have to come out and right off the bat take a deep shot or two, even if it's performative, even if they know the chances of completion aren't very good. And I don't know what's going on with MVS, if they have to make Patrick throw to him, if they have to pull him and make Justin Watson the deep threat. Who knows? But I think they have to at least pretend that is something they want to do to give the running game a chance, because otherwise it's going to be stacked boxes. It's going to be totally predictable. And I don't think you want to do that against Lou Anarumo, of all defensive coordinators.
Oh, geez, I totally missed this one. The guys in the chat are telling me that CH did not practice today with an illness. It's that time of year. Everybody's sick. I didn't see him down there.
It's P-Ryan time?
It's P-Ryan time. Look, man, he'll play. He'll be all right.
I think so.
When these guys, it's like when you get these colds and you get sick, like you just hunker down at home and drink Gatorade. When NFL players get sick, they hook them up to so many IVs and stuff. Like, it's unbelievable that they're able to bounce back as fast as they are. Probably some sort of, stimulants and things that are legal that they're able to get. Like, it's wild.
He might be in a hyperbaric chamber. Who knows what the heck they're doing?
I think so. Yeah. And I think Jeremy mentioned in the chat that he was worried about Trey Hendrickson. I think that's the thing. After last week going up against another top tier pass rusher, the Chiefs just looked really at sea. And again, we talked about this with Wanya Morris, is teams are getting tape on Wanya Morris. They're breaking down which moves are working against him. He's struggling. That was always going to happen. Donovan Smith's not coming back, so they're going to need to help him. So hopefully, if it's going to be P. Ryan, I don't know how P. Ryan's pass blocking is, but I hope he's in there and he's ready to chip, because that's what they're going to need him for.
Well, the problem with this is last week they were, and recently I think they've been having Travis Kelce chip too much. And God, you don't want your first read giving chip help. You just don't. You want him out there running around. The tackles allowed 15 pressures last week. Even Joe Thuney, who, I mean, we've been singing his praises all season long. I think he's been the best guard in the NFL, especially pass blocking. He allowed 4 pressures last week. He wasn't himself. I thought actually the best offensive lineman last week was Trey Smith. Isn't he banged up now?
Yeah. And this is where I go back to the whole Christmas thing. Like, when a guy like Joe Thuney doesn't play well, it just seemed like a bad mix all around. All right. What do you, in your opinion, what do the Chiefs need to do to get the win in this one? And what is your final score prediction?
They have to stop shooting themselves in the foot. When you are worst in the league in turnover differential, and some of that is the defense doesn't force takeaways, absolutely, but the offense is careless with the ball, and they also are careless with the little details. So they lead the league in penalties as well. Those two things combined basically make it impossible to sustain drives. They have to sustain drives and play mistake-free offensive football. It doesn't have to be Tyreek Hill sexy. It just needs to be sound. They have to get Mahomes doing some things in rhythm, so this just isn't hero ball all the time. I think if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, they can sneak out of New Year's Eve with a win and kind of turn the page and get back on track.
What's your final score prediction?
It's not pretty. It's Bengals 16, Chiefs 17. They eke it out though.
Yikes.
Yeah,
look,
I
man,
said it's not pretty, man.
You're right. You're right. It's not been pretty.
We're slowly bouncing up from rock bottom though, so it might take a little while.
I think that on New Year's Eve we're going to find out what this Chiefs team is made of. I thought that this was going to happen before. I thought after the Packers game, but I think it really had to get that bad for them to evaluate properly where they're at as a football team. Look, man, I know everybody is down. I'm down. It feels awful. I am going down with the ship, man. This stretch of football has been terrible, but I have watched too many games of this team with Kelsey and Andy Reid and this interior offensive line and the way this defense is playing. Look, if they put a clown suit on me, fine, man. I'm wearing the colors. This is a fan podcast. I believe in them. They're not giving me a whole lot of reason to believe in them, but I just think I think they've got too much competitiveness to go out like this. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to bounce back. I think they're going to do it in a big way. Give me the Chiefs 28, Bengals 19. I just think they're going to come out with their hair on fire after that game. I think that there was probably a team meeting. I think they're embarrassed. And I think they're going to come out maybe for the first time all year and actually be the aggressors, because they got a bad taste they got to wash out of their mouth. And I think they're going to do it against the Bengals at Arrowhead.
Yeah, now they're playing for pride. And I can't stop laughing because you said clown suit and team colors. So now I'm picturing Patrick wearing the Ronald McDonald clown suit. And, it's Chiefs colors. We might be doing that. But, yeah, I'm picking them too. I think that it can only get better. It can only get better.
Yeah, I mean, it literally cannot get worse than that Raiders game. And like I said, no. I made my decision. I thought a lot about it. I'm going down with the ship, man. I'm going to give back to this team what they've given to me over the last 5 years of just Super Bowls and AFC championship games and winning and dominance over our rivals and all that stuff. I'm ride or die, man. It's gotten tough here. It's gotten tough, and we'll continue to break them down and analyze them and criticize them. But I am not going to throw in the towel on them until somebody puts them in the ground for the season. I'm Chiefs all the way.
Well, for old school guys like you and I, relatively old school, this is what we were born in. When Bane says you merely adopted the darkness, I was born in it. I never thought I was going to win a Super Bowl or even have a team go to a Super Bowl. So if you just remind yourself of the Chiefs, eras of past, we're still in pretty good shape compared to the past, compared to a lot of teams. And I do really think you can prove statistically that this is rock bottom, because Mahomes has started 109 games and EPA per drive. That Raiders game was 109th. Wow. It was ranked dead last. So that was the worst he's ever played. That's the worst they've ever played. It can only get better. Yeah,
absolutely. Shout out to KCDC for the super chat. It says, keep your head up, Kingdom. Water under the bridge. Let's go into the playoffs, correcting the stupid mistakes, and get some good reps on the road after the wild card and hell, maybe even another Super Bowl appearance. We just got to be that way. You see these delusional fans from other teams, you can go on Twitter right now and find some Broncos fan that's like, Jared Stidham's going to take us. We're going to the Super Bowl. If those guys for those teams can get up for their squad, we can definitely do it for this Chiefs team. There's a lot of correctable mistakes here that they can wrap up and fix. And I think if they do, just the turnovers and the penalties alone, I think they could beat anybody in the league. If they just stop doing that, even if they have a bunch of 3-and-outs and they still struggle on offense, like to stop turning the ball over, stop putting themselves in bad situations with penalties. I think they can. Their defense is good enough that I think they can get to 21 points and win against almost anybody. The 49ers might stomp them, but you never know. You just never know, right? All right. Lauren Shank says, now you're talking positive. Keep that positive mojo coming. They've earned it. Look, we had to go through it. We had to analyze it. It's bad. There's no, I'm not going to give up on them, but I'm also not going to bury my head in the sand about what's happening. Right.
Well, and there's no reason to bury your head in the sand. I am worried that this is a construction problem, a roster construction problem, not just an execution problem, and that they might not be able to fix everything until the offseason. But one thing we do know about Brett Veach is he's not going to take any chances. He is going to overcorrect these problems, specifically the wide receiver room. We saw what he did following Super Bowl 55 when he threw everything but the kitchen sink at the offensive line and turned what really was sort of a glaring problem for the Chiefs in that game and heading into the season into one of the strengths of the franchise.
Yeah, and we'll see. And we're going to find out. I think the one thing that's going to be, I think we'll look back on this season. It's probably not going to end in a Super Bowl just because most seasons don't end in a Super Bowl. But I think we might look back at this season in a year from now and sort of be somewhat thankful for it, because the way, the kind of general manager that Brett Veach is, he is I guarantee you, man, I know I've said this on the show before. If you think we're annoyed, that dude is like, he's trying to get in the Hall of Fame. That's what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like he is, he knows the stakes better than anybody. He knows what he's got in Patrick Mahomes. He's the guy that championed them drafting him. He's not going to sit back and be like, okay, well, and we've seen other teams do this with great quarterbacks. Green Bay, like they just never got him any like legitimate help for years there. He's not going to do that. This whole receiving room is going to be completely different next year. I don't know. Rashee Rice may be the only one back like that. You might be some guys in camp. Sky Moore will probably be just because of the contract thing, but like, he's going to overhaul it, and it could be exciting. They're going to have some legit wide receivers next year, by hook or by crook. He's going to figure out a way to get them. All right.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Let's do some Patty's Power Rankings before we get out of here. And I hate to do this because I just took us in a positive direction, but I thought we'd do a football rankings, and the football rankings are, who do you blame? Who are your top 3 people to blame for the Chiefs' struggles this year? So why don't you kick us off? Who's your number 3 person? And let us know in the chat too. Who are the 3 people that you blame for all of this?
Right tackle Juwan Taylor. You're one of the highest paid players on the team, one of the highest paid guys at your position in the league, and you're the most penalized player in the league. Now, at first, I did think it was kind of bullshit. I do think he was a marked man. It's really interesting when the NFL and their officials decide to emphasize something and when they don't. For instance, offensive offsides. We've never seen this before. But when something keeps happening, you have to adjust. You have to pivot. You have to find the discipline. You have to tinker until you can survive without false starting. And it just has completely broken his brain. He can't get right. He may have to go see a sports psychologist this offseason. I'm not even joking about that. He might really have to. He's probably going to have to work with someone like Duke Manyweather on his footwork and his technique, and just, he's kind of Humpty Dumpty right now. They're going to have to put him back together. I'm not sure that can happen in season. And it's been very problematic because they spent that money on Juwan Taylor thinking that between Donovan Smith and Wanya Morris, if left tackle was a bit of a problem, well, that's only one weak link on the line. But now they have 2 weak links.
Yeah, I think that's a good number 3. I'm going to go with Kadarius Toney for number 3 for me. I mean, the guy's cost him, at least 2 games single-handedly. So, we're in a much different spot if he just catches a couple balls and doesn't help the other team with bad turnovers. Like, it's just the Chiefs are AFC West champions. They may still be in the hunt for the 1 seed. It's crazy how much of a net negative he's been for this team this year. I don't know, man. He just doesn't have it. Like, at this point, I know some people, our own Matt Connor, still believes in Kadarius Toney's talent, but not as a receiver. I said this last week. I would put him when he comes back. If he comes back, I would put him back in the backfield and just do like the Cordero Patterson. Like, I would just treat him like a running back. I wouldn't throw the ball to him. I don't think at all. Maybe on like a jet, like, one of those little pitch passes, but that's it. Just use him as a running back. When they did that in a game earlier this year, it worked pretty well. And I don't care if he gets hurt. And I'm not trying to sound like cold. I obviously don't want anybody to get injured. But like, one of the reasons you don't run a guy like Kadarius Toney out of the backfield is because you're putting him in danger of getting hit by defensive linemen and linebackers. And he's a smaller dude. I don't care, because he can help the team. So if he gets hurt in service of helping the team, fine, because he's just as, let's be honest, he's just as likely to get hurt out there running around without getting touched. So why not use him in a way that he might actually benefit the team? Put him at running back, give him 6 carries a game to spell Isaiah Pacheco.
Put him in the Jerick McKinnon role.
Yeah.
With dump offs.
I'm even afraid to throw him a swing pass because there's nobody behind him to tackle him.
You just hot potatoes in.
Yeah, when he does a tip drill.
Man.
Just running back. But he's my number 3.
My number 2, let's stick with wide receivers. It's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Just an obvious pick for me here. At least last year, even though I think he wasn't quite as good of a downfield threat as he was in Green Bay. In Green Bay, you would see him house 70-yard bombs. That's never really transpired in Kansas City. But he was at least good enough to threaten opposing defenses. They had to respect him. He has, I don't know, he's just kind of lost it. I mean, he looks kind of washed out there. He looks kind of disinterested out there. I don't know if he's lost a step, if he got his ring and his big contract and he got complacent. He's never been on the same page as Patrick Mahomes. I'm not sure if that's a communication problem on his end, a work ethic problem, or if he just doesn't have it. But the Chiefs kind of scrambled to replace one element of Tyreek Hill, and that's the field stretcher. And for $10 million, that's what they made MVS their highest paid receiver because they expected him to be able to do that one thing. He cannot do that one thing. And it has completely disoriented their offense and made them pretty easy to defend because they're not going to be able to run the ball without that element. So yeah, he is one of the highest paid guys on the team. And I think he deserves the blame here.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. He's not on my list. But look, this isn't about hating MVS or Tony. Like, we wanted these guys to succeed. And I've said this a million times, I will forever be grateful to MVS for what he did for this team last year. I'll be grateful to Kadarius Toney for what he did in the Super Bowl. Like, those guys, in my opinion, like, they're all-time Chiefs because of what they contributed to a Super Bowl run. Like, what happened after it's like people when people bring up Dan Sorensen now and like everybody snickers because his last year was so bad. He was a good player for the Chiefs for a number of years. He helped them win a Super Bowl. Like, that guy he was a favorite. And it's like he had one bad year and it wasn't even his fault. Like, it wasn't, Dan Sorensen didn't just like decide to be a shitty player. Like, he was never a crazy athlete and he just fell off the cliff and the Chiefs were putting him back. They just kept putting him in there and he couldn't play anymore. That's that was unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that people seem to like hate him now. When he's actually like a great chief, in my opinion. He just, at the end, he was done.
I think the way to look at it is we don't hate players, but sometimes we hate that they're not good enough to warrant the draft capital spent on them or the contract that they earned. They're not living up to expectations. That's all it's about. And if guys are exceeding expectations, you praise them. And if they're not, you have to criticize them.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 2 is Sky Moore. And Sky Moore, he hasn't had as a disastrous a season in terms of like just his negative impact is like Kadarius Toney with the drops and the turnovers.
He did lose that Broncos game.
That's right.
You could argue.
Yeah. But just like his overall lack of, the Chiefs needed something from Sky Moore this year. It was very important that Sky Moore give them that. And he just wasn't able to do it. And that really, at the end of the day, like, let's be honest, if Sky Moore, if just one thing was different, like if Sky Moore became what they needed Sky Moore to become, or even if MVS was the MVS of last year, I don't even think we're having this conversation.
Or Kadarius Toney was Percy Harvin light. I mean, just one of those 3 things.
Like, because if you had Sky Moore doing it, or you had MVS, the way that Watson's played, like that would have been enough until you got to Rashee Rice, like coming on the second half of the season. And then I think they would have been okay, but it just never happened. And that's just the gaping hole. The MVS, the Sky Moore, it's just killed them, absolutely killed them. It's one of those situations where like Veach put out a bunch of chips and all the bets lost, like except for Rashee Rice, like all the bets lost, and it was one too many. So he's number 2 for me.
That's a good transition because my number 1, and this is cheating a little bit, but since it's not a player, it's hard for me to separate the 3 and say who's most responsible. So it's Andy Reid, Brett Veach, and Clark Hunt for underinvesting in the offense that surrounds Patrick Mahomes. The left tackle situation is not going to cut it. Donovan Smith, I get why they made that small gamble, but it kind of backfired. And now Wanya Morris is just not ready at all. And then the receiving core, it seems like they took a bunch of flyers and didn't make a bet on a more sure thing. And like you said, none of them hit. So they've needed Rashee Rice in a very complicated offense that depends on immaculate timing and spacing and something that a rookie can't really be ready for. I think that's why when all of us were screaming like Rashee Rice is easily the most efficient, most talented receiver on this team, why they had so much of a struggle getting him to this point, because he still doesn't know exactly what he's doing out there, like theoretically Justin Watson and MVS and those guys do. So I just think if you look at the way they spent and the way their competitors spent, and I'm not talking about the salary cap, I'm talking over the salary cap. I just didn't see that much aggression from them. And I know they think of this as a 10-year window, but I just like them. I don't ever want to see them take Patrick Mahomes for granted again. I kind of felt like they did this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe it was getting scared off by drafting CEH and that blowing up in his face, but that was a smart move. I'm anti taking running backs in the first round, but I understand what Veach was trying to do. He was trying to take an offense that was really good and go nuts, go ham with it. They should be taking skill position players in every single draft. Like they should be taking like at least one wide receiver and like a pass catching tight end or a running back, like maybe 2 receivers every draft if they can help it. It's really important. It's really, really important. Along with making sure that they always have that Juju Smith, at least that Juju Smith-Schuster veteran type, somebody that can come in, that can be reliable, so that you've got better bets placed, because it does take some of these wide receivers these young wide receivers some time to come along, and then they don't always work out, like Sky Moore. So, it wasn't that he didn't invest. Like he back-to-back years in the second round, he took wide receivers. It just hasn't quite worked out with Sky and the veterans he brought in, and he spent serious draft capital. Like the Kadarius Toney trade was a big swing and a miss. Like for the long term, for the short term, it won him a Super Bowl, so fine. But for the long term, that was draft capital he needed to get a younger guy. And so it's learning. Look, Brett Veach is still a pretty young GM, man. Like he's number one on my list too. Like ultimately he's responsible for the roster construction. He'll tell you that. And it hasn't worked out so far this year. We'll see how it all turns out in the end. But yeah, he's still learning, and I think he's getting better, and that's a good thing. Like he's drafting generally really well. Few positions that have not worked out, but he's been on the show. He's really smart. I think the Chiefs are in good hands for the long run. But this is a frustrating season so far, no doubt.
Yeah. I love this class, though. We're being hard on him, but FAU seems like a bit of a luxury pick now in retrospect, that he's not even playing with Minihue and Dana and Karlaftis ahead of him. You hate in one of the prime years of Kelsey, and this could be the last year, of Mahomes, but this could be the last year that they have the trio of Chris Jones, Mahomes, and Kelsey together ever. You hate for their first round pick to be spent on someone who's not on the field. But Rashee Rice, what a second rounder. He's outplayed, I think, pretty much all the receivers picked in the first round. Maybe there's an argument for Jordan Addison. Wanye Morris has all the tools, all the traits, and Shamari Connor looks awesome. So it looks like another strong draft class on the heels of two really strong draft classes.
Yeah. And the FAU pick, and I get what you're saying. I think in the long run, he's got to work out. If he works out in the long run, then you're going to be in a much better shape, because Karlaftis looks like he's going to continue to get better. If he can take one more step forward and actually become elite or close to elite, that and then he's got FAU over there on the other side. Like that's going to be good news for the Chiefs making those investments. And Veach definitely tries to, he's always drafting a little bit ahead, and he's trying to plan. So we'll see. He's got some work to do this offseason, but he's got a great defense. He's got a Hall of Fame quarterback and a Hall of Fame head coach.
Well, we'll see. His best two defensive players are both free agents, so that is a little scary.
He's got to bring back L'Jarius Sneed, man.
I know. You could not have made a stronger case than L'Jarius Sneed made this year.
No. He's a keeper. I think if you can keep him and McDuffie together, you can build around that, and it'll help. But it's gonna be time to say goodbye to Chris Jones. I think it sucks, but Sneed's younger. It is what it is. All right, we got to get out of here, y'all. Listen, we are going to be back. Don't worry. We're not going anywhere. New Year's Eve, at least. I will be here. Matt Connor will be here for pregame. Matt Verderem will join me for the postgame show. So we'll have the full slate of shows for you on this Bengals game. Come hell or high water, we're going to talk it out, and hopefully the Chiefs send us into 2024 feeling a hell of a lot better than we did on Christmas. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. Shout out to producer Richard, who is not producing today, but did help me produce the show. So we basically produced the show, and I just had to hit a button on the way out here. So he's enjoying some well-deserved time off.
You're Kanye now, man. You're like Kanye. You're spitting bars and producing. Look at you.
Yeah, I'm doing the best that I can. So we might have a rough transition out of here because I maybe don't know what I'm doing, but thank you for all your support. Again, hit that like button on the way out. We will be back this weekend for the Bengals game. But thank you to Adam Best for joining me tonight on a time of year when everybody wants to not be working. So I appreciate you, brother. And we'll see you guys this weekend. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.